Question. All right, we're talking about how you accelerate your transition from the old to the new. How many people here are responsible for the old? Good show of hands, thank you. How many are responsible for the new? There we go. All right, I think you're in the right place. Now, honestly, I didn't want to call this session, How do you accelerate your transition? I really wanted to call it, How to avoid the three horsemen of the cloud apocalypse. All right, and a lot of you are wondering, why aren't there four horsemen? All right, it's cloud. We already saved 25%. So the focus here is on the challenges. I'll just give it a second because we've got, come on folks, there's plenty of seats in the front here. Come on down. So we're going to have an interesting session. We're not going to do a lot of talking. We're going to do a lot of demonstration. And when I say demonstration, we're not previewing some future release of some future product. We're going to do live production, generally available product that we are currently using, all right, in our own business in order to avoid the pitfalls and the challenges of the three horsemen. And what are those? So if you're moving from the old to the new, there are three big challenges that most, if not all, organizations face in this shift to cloud. Number one, how do you migrate, not just migrate a workload, but how do you migrate at scale? So we're talking not just tens of workloads a month, we're talking thousands of workloads. How do you accelerate that transition? That's number one. That's the first horseman. The second one is modernize. So you can lift and shift workload into the cloud, but the reality is that you want to improve that workload. You want to make it cloud ready. You want it to leverage cloud attributes. So how do you modernize your applications for the cloud? So that's the second horseman. The third horseman is manage. So once you're in the cloud and you have a large estate, what are the best practices? What capabilities? And so as we, somebody's laughing. So as we go through this, you all have different roles in your organization. And so there are people here who are responsible for driving cloud migration. I'm sure there are people here who are solution architects who are responsible for what those cloud solutions look like. And lastly, there's a new crop of folks, new roles that are emerging in organizations around cloud admins. How do you manage that new estate? And so we're going to show you and demonstrate based on the day in the life of those people. People responsible for migration, people responsible to solution, and people responsible for that eyes on glass, day-to-day management of that new estate. So I hope you're all in the right room, and you're excited to hear, as we are, about what we're doing in this space in order to tackle that. Now, I waited until everybody was settled. I'm Michael LeBeau. I have the pleasure of working for Accenture and leading our Accenture Cloud Management Platform efforts. And so I have a large team, and we've been driving that for a number of years now. I have my partner in crime here, Rodrigo Flores, who leads our platform innovation. I think of him as our CTO. And so I'm going to ask Rodrigo now to take over. And again, we're just going to kind of drive through this.
Clicker. Thank you, Michael. Thanks for joining us. You could have been anywhere. You chose to be here with us. I appreciate that. By the way, that's a quote from Jay-Z. So we'll try to keep it entertaining. And this is a great presentation because we're going to really try to get a lot of time for demos. So I want to start by setting the stage. What is the challenge that we all face, in particularly between what I would call the traditional IT, right, and what we now know as the digital business? And many of us, I think, are in both sides. How many of you actually are managing both the old and the new at the same time? All right. How many of you would like to walk off a cliff? right? So it's difficult. You have in the traditional side what I sometimes call the ITIListas, right? You know, change control, Friday meeting, go through the cab. We want to have everything, you know, in a service catalog and, you know, with request processes. And on the other side, you have people who really want agility, right? They want to be deploying hundreds of times per day. They can't, you know, they don't want to go to a meeting, right? Because there's an old saying from, I'm quoting myself here, which is, if it's not automated, we got to have a meeting, right? And nobody likes meetings. So to bridge this gap, right, to make this thing work on both sides, you really need a cloud management platform. I know it's hard to read from the back. We've proven that we are only affected to the first 10 rows. After that, the learning dissipates very quickly. So, but what we mean by a cloud management platform is the set of tools that provides the automation, provides cost management, provides the migration tools, provides the blueprinting that lets us, you know, set up Azure resource models and then deploy them consistently and automatically. And which we'll be showing you later today. It means also the managed services. You know, so just because you put it in the cloud doesn't mean patching goes away, right? Who loves patching? Oh, one person. Thank you, sir. We all want to talk to you after that. So what we need is this management platform. And what are the essential elements of a management platform for cloud? Number one, you need freedom with control. And what do we mean by freedom with control? The fact is that on the right side, the people who want agility, the DevOps model, right? They really want to be able to deploy every time, you know, at the push of a button without going through complicated, onerous processes. On the other hand, you know, the compliance officer still wants their logs. They still want their, you know, their bit of flesh, yeah? And somewhere along the way, somebody says, you need an approval process. Sir, you agree with me? We need an approval process? Nobody needs an approval process in the cloud. So we need this balance. So we need a platform that helps us do this balance. Cost management. After security, the biggest concern people have is cost management. Why? Because it's easy to deploy in the cloud. It's easy for someone to fat finger, you know, type 1,000 instead of 100 VMs, and all of a sudden you get a big bill. Or this auto-scaling stuff, right, which sometimes works fantastic when your website's being hit, but other times, you know, you get a big bill. It should be delivered as a service. If you're really using the cloud, and you're really going to public cloud first, and I don't know if you heard our CIO on Monday, right? Accenture today is 60% in the cloud for our internal applications. Public cloud, not private cloud. I'm talking about public cloud, 60%. So once you're up there, you need insights because things go bump. You know, the vendor moves you to the wrong rate card. You get an email saying we're going to have to vacate your host. So things happen, and when those things happen, you need those actionable and intelligence and expert guidance. You need somebody to help you, and that's what we provide. And finally, of course, you have security and service operations. You still need to integrate with ServiceNow. You still need to integrate with Microsoft System Center. You still need to have ties to security. None of that goes away. That's what we mean by a cloud management plane, a consolidated cloud management plane. And the basics of this are, of course, on the one side, you have the public cloud, and you still will have the private cloud. And you have your people, process, and technology, as you've always had. And so on the other side, we now have to be able to integrate with those clouds. So you need to have systems that let you create and integrate with multiple clouds. You need to have your processes. You know, that's where orchestration, automation, configuration management, all that good stuff, Puppet and Chef and PowerShell, etc. And then there are three major things that we then need to manage at Accenture. The cloud management services, which is your backup, your patching, antivirus security, the management platform, the cost, provisioning, etc. And then, of course, the help desk. We have to run a consolidated help desk for all of Accenture. So when somebody has a problem, they know where to go and to get help right at the proper level. And all of this is in order to enable the three major things. Migrations, as Michael said, modernization, and then, of course, finally, when you're steady state management. So what I want to do here is introduce my colleague, Sean Peterson, and he's actually going to talk about migration, and we will have a demo of that. All right? Thanks.
Thank you, Rodrigo. So I have the pleasure of introducing the first horseman, Migrate. So when we're talking about migration, as Michael had said, this isn't about migrating one workload, one VM into Azure. We're talking about migrating businesses onto cloud. And that journey involves full evaluation of the business case. It involves evaluation of the applications and the infrastructure to be able to rotate the business predictably, safely, securely, reliably into cloud to take the benefits of that cloud. So when we talk about that, I've had the pleasure to work with a number of companies to help them on that journey. And one such company we've worked with is a global resources company. They have sites all over the globe. They have 2,500 VMs. They have 800 applications, and they need to rotate very quickly into the cloud to be able to take advantage of cost, agility, and innovation. And so we have worked with them to evaluate what goes into Azure IaaS, what goes into O365, what goes into maybe a modernization and uplift that into Azure PaaS. And as you can imagine, that journey is complicated. We need to structure that in a way that we don't disrupt the business, we move efficiently, we do it safely, we do it securely, we do it reliably. Oh, the clicker. So when we do that, we certainly need structure and industrialization. And that starts, for us, with a methodology. And that methodology starts with engagement with the business. What does the business need for this? How is cloud going to deliver that cost optimization? How's it going to deliver that efficiency? How's it going to deliver agility and innovation? And then it's a run-through of all the applications that that company has, and understanding how those applications, whether as they are, modernized, new applications, new SaaS services, can enable that agility, that efficiency. And then we work through with IT to determine what are the systems that support that today, and then what are the cloud components that need to support that tomorrow. And we need to structure that, bundle that, understand not just which VM moves, which application moves, but how we do that in a bundle in a way that doesn't disrupt the business. We can't, through these industrialized migrations, kill the business. We can't take an outage. Year-end close has to occur. We've got to get the migration done in windows that don't disrupt that. And it goes through the full life cycle. We determine what are the right dispositions for all those applications in bundles and drive that, whether it's a remediate the app and move, whether it's move then remediate, whether it's modernize the app, light touch, whether it's rewrite the application to take advantage of PaaS services or SaaS services. And then certainly it results in run. We can't just migrate and walk away. We have to do the migration in a way that allows for clean cloud operations as we continue to drive the value of that. So that in itself requires industrialization, as I mentioned, that we can increasingly automate, organize, and drive through industrialized solutions that we've developed. So I've got my friend David Mills here, who's going to talk through some of the capabilities that we've developed to really drive what I just described, that whole methodology from planning to execution in industrialized fashion.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, take it away.
All right. So I'll apologize up front. This isn't necessarily a really sexy demo, but I think it's an insightful demo, and it's an important demo. And if you think about what Sean was talking about, there's so much involved in an application migration, especially when you've got a lot of them and you need to keep the business up and running. So generally speaking, you've got the inventory process. That can take a long, long time. You're collecting all the data. There's high-level planning once you kind of map the dependencies and figure out what the business use is for the different applications. Then you get into detailed planning. You're trying to figure out, what is it worth moving or not moving? What should you lift and shift? And then finally, you get to the execution phase. But you really need a place to collect all of this information and make sure it's organized and make sure that everybody has that same source of information and they're staying up to date as they work on this migration and go through the process. So the tool that I'm sharing out now is what we use. We've been using this for, I think we've done over 200,000 application migrations doing this. Some in the thousands, some in the 10,000s that we've used. So this really has to be a repeatable and industrialized process. I'm not going to bore you by walking you through a questionnaire and here's how we gather information to take inventory and all of that, because I think many of you are familiar with that and it would, would take a long, long time. But I really want to key on some particular areas where we've taken those learnings and the things that we've industrialized. For instance, just templatizing some of the processes, because you really need to map out the process that needs to happen to move an application prior to, during, and after that migration. What's the right point to cut over? what are the dependencies on that application. And so this is just an example of some different templates that we have that we've put into the system and that are reusable over time. These can obviously be combined, but you can see that there's all the different steps and dependencies. And at what point do you need to start those activities to meet your T0 date when you're going to start migrating? So needless to say, you can use all of this, and it's probably going to cut about, I think we've learned, 50% of the time it takes to do that migration if you can just codify some of this stuff, that you can templatize it and industrialize it, and then make sure that you can reuse it. So given that we have all of that stuff in the system, if we go to some of these migration bundles that Sean was talking about, let's say I have a wave that I'm going to migrate in Q3 number 4. There's some bundles of resources that are associated with that, and I can search and pull those up. Now, if I click into these, I can see that I have a lot of different applications, some different instances, and even a service that I need to move over. And what I've considered in all of this is what do I need to do when, step by step, to not bring the business down or to have minimal downtime for the business. Now, if I want to see and actually go to the next step, I can actually select these and put these on a design surface and see what the relationship is. So if I drag these over, and this is the kind of sexy part, all right? So here's where you get some UI that's a little bit of eye candy. If I hit expand, you can see all of these things, all of these activities that have to happen, and they have to happen in a certain order. Now, they're mapped out here for obvious reasons, so we don't bring things down. We've also built some intelligence into this. So let's say that I drag and drop something that doesn't belong. It's automatically going to tell me, you can't do that. So you need to go and back that out. So I'll just take this cursor and drag it back where I got it from, and then everything's fine. So this is really useful for people to be able to go in and get a visual representation of all these steps that need to happen in this wave with all these different applications and resources, and make sure that those are going to happen on time. So once I get over to the execution phase, let's say that I've got everything tied up and sequenced correctly according to the correct processes. Now I can go to a place called My Tasks. So if I'm the person working on the migration, like I said, it's really important to have that one source of truth. I have that here now. And I can go through and see all the activities that are assigned to me. I can tell whether they're active. I can also tell whether there's prerequisites that haven't been completed yet. And there's predecessor tasks. And so I can go in and figure out what I need to do to make that happen. I can also drill down and find detailed notes in the same place related to this task. If you need to have screenshots that somebody takes that owns that application, you get it from them, insert it here. If there's an issue with that task, if it was causing a problem, you can also log an issue in that location. So if I'm a project manager, now stepping outside a little bit, and I want to know how things are going, this is also the one source of truth. So if I go and look at, let's say I've got some bundles that I have in a wave here, and I'm a project manager, I've got my bundle activity. I can see a yellow line. I know some of these numbers are small, but just look at that yellow line. That's T0, right? So that's when you kick everything off. That's when the migration starts. And all I have to do is look left here, and I see all these blue boxes. If everything blue's over here, I can, at a glance, as a project manager, go in and say, things are ready to go. If I do have issues, I might see, or something I need to follow up on, I'll see a maroon box over here. Somebody needs to disable monitoring, right? So I can go back in and follow up on that task. But it's a really good high-level way for a project manager to see what's going on. Now, if I'm somebody who's more executive level and I want to see how things are going, I can look at a report that really gives me kind of a timeline and maps my progression of actual migration activity against what I'm supposed to be doing. So this is a really quick and easy way for me to go in here and say, okay, the dark blue line or the more bright blue line is how I'm tracking, and the expected progression of this migration is the kind of grayish line that you see up there. And I can go down to more details below this report, but at the very top I can look at this and see, okay, things are pretty much on track, everything's fine. So that's really where I'm doing all of this planning if I'm working on the migrations, if I'm somebody who's in project management, even at an executive level, and you're tracking all those activities that have to happen before, during, and after. We also are connecting with automation around the actual migrations themselves. And one of the places we do that that I'm going to show you here in a second is over in the management platform, where we have something that's called Cloud Mover. You can go in here and actually select something to do one-off migration. This can be triggered by the migration planning tool as well. So if I go into the catalog and I see workload migration, I can go in here and fill out a simple form with some information about where is this resource coming from, where is it going to, and if all I have to do is click on Move My VM. I've got some forms here, and we won't sit here and wait for it to happen, but I can put in some basic information about charge code, where is this going to be going. I'm going to send it up to Azure. What's the source server name? Put the source server name in there, and whether this is going to be manual or automated, meaning it's going to be triggered by an external system, and I can kick that whole thing off and get it running. And once I do that, I can actually look at how I'm tracking against the progress, and it's showing me, the image of origin is being copied, there's a new instance being created on the cloud you're moving to, and you can have it actually synchronize on an ongoing basis, so you keep both servers up and running, and you have the least downtime possible with the server that you're going to be migrating, and then it does a final sync right before cutover and spinning up on the new server. So basically, I've got an application that's running, a web application that's on my data center, and I'm moving it. You're keeping that up and running as long as possible. It cuts over, and then it's going to pop up in Azure once it goes to the other side. So it's a real quick tour of some of the tools that we're using, but hopefully this gives you an idea of some of the ways we're taking the methodologies and we're taking some of the expertise, and we've actually built them into a platform that helps you reduce the time to migrate workloads, and it's going to reduce the chance of errors once you get things over.
Great, thanks, David. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, David. Can you switch me back over? Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and so as David had just shown, this is just a little bit of an insight of how we work to manage all of that complexity. If you think about what it takes to do this, we're talking all of the IT admins, we're talking all the application owners, thousands of workloads, hundreds of apps, dozens of business units, and being able to migrate that without disrupting the business. That's what it, through our experiences, through our lessons learned over the years, that's what it takes. And so these are the kind of results that we've seen. We can cut workload migrations by 50%. That again, it's not just the automation and the migration of the workload, that's important, but all that people coordination, all that time coordination, status reporting, all of that done through these kinds of solutions. And the industrialization of getting up to thousands of workloads per month. Because the idea is to get from the old to the new as quickly as possible to get to those cost savings and flatten the overall time it takes to get there, but do so in a reliable, predictable manner. So now we're going to talk about modernize. That's great that we can do all that migration. Migrate into what? We're going to be migrating into the cloud, but cloud is not just a generic thing. It has to be very specifically built for purpose. And so had an opportunity to work with yet another customer very recently who is a global beverage provider. Somebody you'd all recognize, probably partook of it this morning. And so, or some of their products this morning. And so, through that, what we've learned in working with companies like this is they had a specific scenario of needing to deploy some kind of collaboration application to hundreds of retail sites across the globe. And they've been doing that in a manual way, inconsistently, and that really broke down a lot of the collaboration that they were attempting to achieve across these retail sites. So, working through the methodologies that I'd introduced before, we landed on the need for SharePoint extranets in those sites. But we had to do so again in a way that was cost efficient and very quickly to be able to deploy them, to be able to update, to be able to manage them. And so we learned through that process, and again in working in other scenarios, how do you do this in a much more enterprise fashion, in ways that are configurable, dynamic, and be able to do that though with consistency and not lose that trade-off of reliability standardization, and do so in a way that brings together the power of the cloud. And so digging just a bit deeper into some of the methodology we talked about previously, it involves evaluating those applications for that business use case to determine what to do with it. And we just simply title those as the 6 R's. Do I remove the app? Do I really need that application, or can I kill it? Rationalize. When we tend to go through and look at all these applications, we find there's a lot of redundancy. And so sometimes it's a combination of remove, collapse some of the functionality, maybe move to a consolidated platform. And then relocate. And some of the tooling that David had talked about is the methodology and capabilities we use to really industrialize that. I'm going to take advantage of techniques of doing virtual to virtual, physical to virtual. Sometimes I do, I just do lift and shift. A lot of times that takes the form of location to a cloud or a cloud adjacent co-location to be able to migrate something if I can't yet get it into cloud, but plan to get it there very soon. And then we start to move into some of the more higher business value activities, but with some work and trade-offs. So those tend to be the cloud rewrites. Do I do a light touch to be able to take advantage of some cloud capabilities like PaaS, where I have to remove maybe some synchronous communications for asynchronous or take advantage of queuing services, all the way to cloud native. These tend to be your applications that you're looking for high degrees of scalability. You're looking to take advantage of containers, service fabric, and those types of capabilities. And you will get the benefit of that high degree of dynamicism, that high degree of agility with that application to support the business. And that's what we then do, as we talked about before. We engage with the line of business. What are you trying to achieve? Are we just trying to optimize? Are we trying to deliver new capabilities faster? So in the case of this beverage provider, that was exactly it. We got to get collaboration better, we got to get it done globally, and we have to get it done fast. So they were looking to harness the power of cloud to take advantage of that from a business opportunity, not just cost takeout. And then we start to evaluate that very systematically. What's this going to cost to move it, to modernize it? What are the benefits we get out of that? What's the risk associated with that? Are we going to disrupt the business? Is there a high degree of technology risk? And then what's the timelines? We have to fit this inside the business window. These modernizations and migrations don't take place while the business takes time off. Everything increasingly is moving more quickly, and so we have to fit these into the right windows to execute it very carefully. And then lastly, it's the benefit. I seem to be stuck here. There we go. And it's the benefit. So it's being able to understand what are the costs, risk, time trade-offs to the overall benefit to the line of business. And that's how we determine the ROI, we determine the dispositions, and we set the roadmap that we can then execute in tooling like David had shared. And so what's it take to be able to pull all this together? So what we've learned is it takes a lot of cloud architecture acumen. How do I pull together the infrastructure, the application platforms, to be able to tie the best of Azure, O365 together to be able to provide a safe, reliable platform that's going to be able to execute this. It takes understanding of that application workload, the characteristics, the IOPS. Is it sensitive to outages and reliability? Do we have synchronous or asynchronous communications? When the business drives workload, how does it scale up? How does it scale down? All of those things need to be factored in to how I architect that in the cloud. And then lastly, it involves the cloud lifecycle. How do I do deployments of that infrastructure and application? How do I do updates to that? How do I change it? How do I modify it? All these things have to come together in an increasingly codified way with infrastructure as code and configuration as code to be able to do this very quickly at enterprise scale in a very dynamic, configurable way. And I'm going to introduce my colleague here, Ron Gilpin. Ron's going to share with us ways that we've industrialized that, beyond just subject matter experts in each of those areas with scripts showing up, but in ways that we've worked to codify that using the best of some of the tools we have in the Azure platform to do this at scale.
Okay, hey, thanks, Sean, appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to walk through a demo that Sean just pointed out, which is for a global coffee company. It's a project we delivered a little while ago. And we used a solution framework that we put together. Up on the screen, we have a couple different marketplace items, and I know we've all seen marketplace items out there that have solutions like this. You click on it, but basically they're sandboxes. Our team, our projects we work on, we don't do sandboxes. We do enterprise cloud platform solutions. So we have to go way beyond just installing a single machine that has all the services on it. So that adds a lot of complexity to your solution. So we needed to come up with an end-to-end cloud platform design and deployment solution. So that's what I'm going to walk you through. Now, even though I'm going to walk you through a SharePoint, if you know these other solutions like Sitecore, SAP, or think about something else, think about the processes I walk through this that you would have to do for that solution. We have these built for these other solutions as well. Okay, we're going to kick it off here. Stick with me on this one because this is the really cool part. In fact, actually a couple of cool parts. Where David was mentioning where his demo wasn't sexy. This is a sexy demo. Okay, the first thing we do is we actually have two components to our solution. We have a design engine component, which essentially is going to help us design the end-to-end solution. And it's going to design it based on reference architectures that we've worked with Microsoft and also the application platform SMEs to actually come up what should the cloud architecture be when you're going to go in. So it's taken all Microsoft's and the vendor's best practices and built this in. The second piece is we have a deployment engine. The deployment engine is based on Microsoft best practice for how you deploy solutions to the clouds, basically templates and scripts. So we're doing infrastructure as code, and we're doing configuration as code. So we're using templates and DSC within our framework to actually do our deployments. Okay, on every project we start out, we're going to identify, this one was a retail client, and this was for a SharePoint extranet portal. So the solution is SharePoint, but we could click down. If we're going to do something else, we could select another solution here. It's kind of small there. I may have to blow this back up. So anyway, what we're going to do next is we collect the information because we're going to have to deploy this into a subscription. So we have this subscription information here. What we would do is in the client is we would go ahead and pull in what their subscriptions were. You could do a drop down, pick the subscription you want to deploy to. The next one is we're going to set up the solution itself. So the specifications that we actually need for the solution, blow that back up, is that we know that we're going to do it for the UAT environment first. So we're going to design the UAT environment. We know it needs high availability to it. And we have to give it some information to help the configuration part of this. So we need to know what the network classes we're going to use to set up our cloud environment. The next thing is over on the left-hand side, for those of you who know SharePoint, we have to identify what the service applications we're going to install. So for this instance, we're going to do search, manage metadata, user profiles, and state, and distributed cache. I could turn any of these on or off by just selecting them, but for this solution, we needed all of these. This is where one of the cool parts of our design engine comes in, is that we're using the usage capacity and performance metrics that Microsoft has provided for helping you design your platform to support the user and the applications that you're going to be deploying on. So in this case, we have 20,000 users that we needed to support. So SharePoint, if you guys know SharePoint, it's all based on user count, requests per seconds, and concurrent users. So we've identified and built that into the design engine. So we come down here where we'll have what their user count is, what our total, and also what our peak is going to be. So what it spits out is, at the bottom here, is what is the web front ends that we need, the minimum web front ends to support the solution. So we only need 2 web front ends for a minimum because we have high availability. We couldn't do it with just one. But we only need 2 to support this particular solution just based on the requirements we put in there. Okay, so next what we need to do is we're going to move on to the configuration. We need AD information. We know that SharePoint has to connect to AD. We know that we have to create service accounts. We know we have to do domain join servers in there. So we need to have at least least privileged access to the Active Directory domain. We get the credentials in here, and then we identify what our domain is going to be, and then our credentials down here. Next, we're going to move on to is the SharePoint configuration itself. This is the information that you have to gather whether you're going to deploy a single farm with 1 or 2 servers, or if you're going to do one that has like 20 or 30 servers. You have to have the base configuration that's going to set up your web servers, your app servers, and your SQL servers. So on the left-hand side, we have our product key or passphrase, and then what the version. We have CUs, so we actually do support different CUs that need to be supported for each deployment. Then we identify what the port we're going to use for this. On the credentials side, SharePoint needs specific credentials for specific service accounts, so again, we have to set these up. When we move down into the services and the database names, SharePoint has a lot of databases, and a lot of people try to shortcut which databases they're going to use. This is based on Microsoft's best recommended practice for what's going to get set up. Same thing for the services. We have the user profile services, the managed metadata, and the search. Then on the left-hand side here, you can see these other services. So once we have all this information, it actually kicks out what the nodes are and the configuration is going to be. So we know that on a node count, we have 2 web front-end servers, 2 app servers, 2 database servers. It's a high availability group, so we also need a witness server in here. So this is what's going to be deployed. This was put together by the design engine based on the input that we've created so far. So the next thing we need to move on to is the SQL configuration, because SQL is a little bit separate from SharePoint. We do need to do a specific a SQL setup first. So we have to provide all the information that's needed to actually do the high availability server, the instances, the availability groups, and then also the witness server. Okay, so this next one is a summary of what we just did. So at the top here shows this DNS summary. So we know that we're going to use an address space. It's a Class C address space. We have a DNS servers we're going to use. We have the domains that needs to be joined to it. On the right-hand side here, this is our network. So you're going to notice that this has kicked out actually four separate subnets. The best practice recommendation is that we isolate each one of the server roles into different segments. So that's what this reference architecture is actually built. So we have one for the web, app, database, and then we have a gateway subnet for communications. Then next here we have basically a bill of materials. We have the web front ends, tells us how many we have of each one. We have what the size of the server is. We could change that if we need to. And then we have some IP address and the storage type that's going to be used. And then down at the bottom, we have our service that's going to be installed. Now this is kind of key here because these services, it knows which service to install it on. It knows that it's going to install search and metadata on the web front ends, and it knows it's going to use user profile services and an application server. You don't want to install services on the wrong servers. So once we have this, the next thing we can do though is for those of you that have built scripts, a lot of scripts, and you do deployments, and you do full network builds and then application deployments, you click on it, 3-4 hours down the road, it fails on you. So what we did is we built validation in here. So when we do this validation, it's actually running this against Azure, all the configuration from the resource group, the VNet, the subnets, the servers, the OSs, the SharePoint install. It's running that against Azure to make sure everything is actually going to work so that we don't get 3-4 hours into it and have this fail. So we have a complete successful pass here. The other thing that's kind of cool is that it's great being able to see this on a page, but architects, we like to see a visual representation. So what we're going to do when we click visualize, it's going to bring up a visual design of our solution. So it's drawn out exactly what is being built and how it's going to be built in Azure. So again, we have a resource group up here. I can validate this as our VNet. I have separate subnets for each one of these. I know that since it's going to be high availability, we're also building in availability sets. So we have that for each one of the server roles. We have our database and our witness server. We have a load balancer that's going to go for the web front ends. And then we have our gateway for communications. This is everything that you need to deploy an enterprise solution. So this is just a reference architecture. And a lot of people get out to say, well, this is great, but I have clients or we have internal requirements that we need to do things a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this configuration to my reference architecture. And I'm going to come out here and just visualize this again. So we're going to see what we have. So for this particular client that we had, they didn't want to have segregation and isolation between their app database, their application servers and the database servers. They wanted those in the same VNet, but they did want isolation for the web front end servers. So what we want to do is we want to take these application servers and we want to move them to the other VNet, the other subnet, and then we want to clean it up. So I'm going to go into the nodes here. And this over here on the left-hand side gives us the ability to go through and customize whatever we need to in this design, whether it be resource groups, the virtual network, subnets. We can go through and customize all of this using this left-hand column. So I'm going to go into the app servers. I'm going to click this. This is all the information that goes in for designing and deploying those app servers from the VM, the disk settings, the network settings. So in the network settings, I'm going to go down to the subnets that it's attached to. And I'm going to change this and put this into the database. Okay, now that I have that in the database, what I need to do is I need to go clean up that subnet that's out there. So I'm going to go to my virtual networks, go and edit that. I'm going to go down and find my application subnet, and I'm going to remove that. I'm going to save it. I'm going to come back, and I want to take a look and see what I just did. So as I visualize, you can see now, we've actually taken that subnet, application subnet, moved all the servers, the application servers, over into the other subnet. We've moved it and cleaned it up. Maybe able to validate this. This looks good. This is what I want to deploy. I could click on deploy right now and it'll deploy to Azure because I've also validated it. Now, I'm not going to do a deploy right now because there's a lot that's going on here. Deploying all of the network, the resources, and then SharePoint takes about 4 or 5 hours to deploy. But think about it, 4 or 5 hours to do this. We just designed this in under 15 minutes. It's pretty cool stuff, isn't it? Yeah? Boom. Okay, another challenge that we run into is that, okay, sure, we've done a UAT. We need to create production. Okay, well, we know that production and UAT are going to be very similar to each other. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a copy of this. I'm not going to go through the whole design aspect again. This is already the reference design. We've already optimized it for the customer requirements. Now I have this copy. I'm just going to go and rename this. And I'm going to make this production. Not only am I going to make it production, I'm going to version this. So a cool feature we've added in is that we can now version all of our environments. So when I save this, now if I can visualize this again just so you can see, this is production. So we got this configuration. Thing about production though is that we got down the road a little bit and figured out that, okay, 2 web front-end servers, 2 app servers was not going to handle the application load that they had designed for the solution. So we did some additional calculations. We needed 4 web front-end servers. We needed 3 app servers. So what we did is we went in here to the nodes. I'm going to go to the web nodes. We have a count of 2. I'm going to update this to 4. And then application servers, I'm going to go to those. And I'm going to make 3 app servers. Okay, I'm going to come back out now and I'm going to visualize that. So this is what I have now. So over here you can see I have 4 web servers been added, and over the application servers I have 3 application servers. So what I'm also to do with this though, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to edit this. And this is actually version 1.1. So what this allows me to do is once I've deployed version 1.0 and it's out there, when I have version 1.1 and I'm ready to go, I can then go deploy this. And all it's going to do is it's going to go out and not deploy the whole solution. It's going to go out and see what's already there. We use both partial and incremental deployments. It's going to take a look what's there and only add what's been changed. So we added web servers, we added app servers. But the really cool thing, we didn't just add a web server and app server. It's configured with the desired state for that specific role. So we don't have any inconsistencies in our environment now with servers with the same roles having a different configuration. And that's actually an area we found in the cloud when you do a lot of scripts where you have a lot of discrepancies, where you are finding a lot of server roles that are inconsistent. What happens there, you go deploy the application starts to fail. This is to ensure that your infrastructure solution that's supporting that business application is designed consistently, repeatable, and efficiently. So we could go ahead and deploy this and it would just version it in. And if we needed to, if there was a problem, we just pull up the version, we can fall back in a matter of hours. Because instead of going out and trying to fix things, we'll go back and redeploy it. And we actually had that with this client, where we actually did a deployment, the configuration was well set. They had gone in and made some adjustments, and it blew up their servers. They called Microsoft support. It was taking hours for them. In fact, it looked like it was going to take days. We just went back in and did a redeployment, 5 hours, they were back up and running. I mean, this is really invaluable, being able to do this to an environment, and it's going to show you what the resiliency of your environment is going to be. Pretty cool stuff, isn't it? I mean, where do you see the end-to-end deployments like this? So the thing I want to wrap up on this as summary, so we have the design engine that does the whole reference architecture. We have our deployment framework. But notice, we didn't go out and write any more templates. We didn't have to write any scripts. This is all done through configuration. So we can do end-to-end, just configuration driven. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks. Great. So as we led into this part, cloud architecture, you saw Ron walk through the design, not just an initial deployment, but the configuration of that. You saw Ron walk through bringing the SharePoint workload acumen into it, how we size it, but the actual life cycle of it. And then you saw how we can do a deployment, we can do an update. Oh, we put something in the wrong spot, let's move it. All at enterprise scale, all industrialized. And what we have found is, in the example that we talked about here, all that architect time, all that engineer time, the mistakes made, we reduce it from weeks to days, 75% reduction in overall effort to get it done, dramatically improved quality. It's pretty powerful stuff. And so if you imagine you're trying to do, in this case, what was it, hundreds of extranets around the globe in a very consistent fashion, this is what we believe it takes to get that done. Yeah. So with that, I'm going to now turn it over to, I believe, Rodrigo to talk about Manage.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that was pretty cool, actually, Ron. So in terms of management, which is the third horseman of the apocalypse, of the cloud apocalypse, so we've migrated, we've modernized, we have our nice templates, driven automation, and now what do we need to do? We need to start thinking about how we're going to have ongoing management of this stuff, right? So we need some sort of centralized dashboard. It's what we found to administer our cloud state, which is, I'm not allowed to say the number, but it's tens and many more of thousands of virtual machines and PaaS services running on Azure, as well more in other clouds. So we need to have a unified portal, some way to have a centralized dashboard to keep track of the health, see the state of those machines, be able to do what we call QADA, question, answer, decision, actions, right? So something happened. What are the questions that we should be asking? Actually, one of the new things about this cloud stuff is that because it's new, we don't really sometimes know which questions to ask. Things happen. The cost went up 25%. What happened on Thursday? What happened? Did we deploy more machines? No. What happened? Nothing but got deployed that day. Why did it go up 25%? We need some analytics tool, right? And by the way, that's a real use case. The answer was the vendor moved us to a different price list temporarily by mistake. So that bill that you get in cloud might not be the bill that you actually should be paying. Little things that you might want to know. So we also need to see resource and data transparency. People want to know who did what, how did that get done. And in the end, it really comes down to a very simple topic, which is how are we going to manage this cloud? How are we going to apply the policies? What kind of governance are we going to have, right? How do we know this is fair consumption? How do we know that people are staying in budget? As I said earlier, cost is one of the big issues, and my colleague David here is going to show you a little bit of that. Because the problem is, from a CFO perspective, they need to allocate. You get a bill, a cloud bill for a couple $100,000 or a couple $1 million. The question is, who ordered what? Is it valid, right? To which cost center should this be assigned? Why is that important? Well, because there's this little thing called Sarbanes-Oxley, the go-to-jail card, which is, one way you can cook the books is by assigning costs to places that, makes a business look good. By having less costs, on business, looks bad, but it's okay. So it's very important to be able to assign costs to the proper cost centers. So with that, I want to kind of turn it to my colleague David here. Oops, I was a little too quick on the... And, go and do a demo here, how we manage our cloud, right? So David here is playing the role of the cloud admin, right? Go ahead, David.
All right, thanks, Rodrigo. So I think you said I was the third horseman, and one of those horsemen was headless, Michael said, and so I'm the headless cloud admin, and I'm riding around. Can you hear me? Yep, it is. So, whoa. All right. So I'm the headless cloud admin, and my job is to manage my cloud resources, control my costs, and make sure everything is secure and protected. So I'm going to show you how you can do that with the Accenture, our cloud management platform. So one of the things, I can't manage what I don't know, what I can't see. So in our cloud management portal, we have what we call a resource dashboard. This provides me insights into my cloud estate. I can see, we'll do a quick overview here, and I can see what resources that I can manage. I can manage VMs. I can manage resource groups, storage accounts, and images, and we're continually adding support for more resources. I can manage my users, my policies, and I also have other features like an audit trail that I can use to see who's doing what. A couple of things I want to point out here. I can see more than just one provider. So This is a cross-platform portal. I can see my different providers. If I was also managing private clouds, I could do that as well. I can see summary information, additional detail information from each of my resources, and I can also search and filter and look for different resources that I can manage. I can choose, if I select a particular resource, I can see details, and I can also perform actions for each of those resources. So we'll go into more detail on each of these as we go through the demo. All right, so one of the things I want to be able to do in my portal is organize things in a way that makes sense to me. My cloud management platform allows me to do that. So say I'm accountable for my human resources. One of my clients is human resources, and I'm accountable for managing their infrastructure. They have benefits apps and payroll apps, and I can organize things in a way that makes sense. So they have health insurance, long-term disability applications, and I can create this structure in a client project and sub-project way that makes sense to me. All right, so when I do that, then all my cloud resources are going to be allocated against those clients' projects and sub-projects. And they're going to be discovered. They're going to appear in my resource dashboard. All right. All right, so I also talked about users. So I've got a whole corral of cloud horsemen that are, it's not just me managing my resources. I have people that I also need to control what they can do. In ACP, our cloud management portal, I can control who can do what for each of these resources. So here I have a dashboard. And here I have all the users that have access to my projects. I can see what role they have, whether they have a client admin role, whether they have a project role, sub-project roles, and I can click on their names and see what they can do. So our cloud management platform has a role-based access control system where I can control what my users can do for each of my clients and projects and sub-projects.
So one of the things that is very important here, and sorry for interrupting you, is in the issue of freedom and control, policy and governance, right? The question becomes like, who can do what? So our clients and our projects, we need to know which organization, which people, what role do they have, and what can they do in this cloud. And by allowing that, right, we're able to get agility to them because they get to see and do exactly what they need, but without getting in the way of other people. Please continue.
All right, so I've got my projects figured out, got my sub-projects, I've figured out who can do what, and I've gone into my cloud management platform and set that all up. I've got all these provider accounts that I also need to manage. In my cloud management portal, I've also can see what cloud provider accounts are associated with my projects. So here you can see I have several. Again, they're cross-provider. And I can also associate what we call quotas. So Rodrigo mentioned freedom and control. So what I can do for each of my providers, I can set quotas. And so when somebody goes in and provisions a particular resource, if I've set a threshold, I'm going to be notified when that threshold reaches 80%, and also when that threshold is reached.
So this is an Accenture best practice that we recommend. Rather than having approvals, we recommend putting quotas and budgets to specific people. Quotas and budgets to specific people, and that way it's kind of go wild. This is your state, right? This is your budget. Do whatever you need to do. You don't need any approvals, right? And we will tell you, the system will tell you where you're approaching a particular threshold. So if you're 80% and it's the first week of the month, you got some trouble, right? If it's 80% and it's the third week of the month, you're okay, kind of thing, right?
Yep. So this can help me. It's avoid surprises at the end of the month when I get my bill. When I get my bill at the end of the month, it's too late. So this is a way I can prevent that from happening. All right, so what else can I do? So one of the key features of our cloud management platform is you can also go out and tag my resources. This provides me a way to keep track of them. And what I can do is create a data model, provide some metadata that's going to help me manage and see what I've got out there in my cloud estate. So here in the portal, I can see the different kind of what I can do with tags. So I want to point out a couple things here. So you'll see in the resource type column, I can tag different types of resources. So it's not just VMs. I can tag resource groups, storage accounts, images, all the resources that I can manage in our cloud management portal. So say I wanted to create a tag and I want to organize my resources based on environment. And say I created a tag called environment. I can create that as a different type. I can kick it as a tag where I can just enter a string, but I could also create it in a way that there's specific values that must be provided. I could call it, say for example, I'd have an environment of demo. So when the user provisions a VM, they must select one of the tags. So I have a consistent data model, and this is across providers, not just one. I can designate things as a billing tag. So when I get my bill from my cloud management portal, all my resources that I've tagged in that way are going to show up in that category, and I can see all of them aligned to all the resources and the costs that were associated with my demo environment. I'll manage my tag. What I can do is manage my tags. I can designate tags that I care about. So when I indicate that a tag is managed, whenever somebody goes out and provisions a resource through my cloud management platform, they're going to be prompted to enter a value for that tag. So this is how I can use my cloud management platform to manage my policies procedures that I use to control my environment. And I can also specify the tag as mandatory. So I can make a tag up here, but I can't make people fill it out. I can do that by specifying as mandatory. So if Rodrigo is going out and provisioning a VM, and the tag is designated as mandatory, he's required to put that value into that tag. So I have a consistent data model across my providers.
Thanks. So let me kind of summarize that, right? Tagging is a critical strategy for managing your cloud state. And it's vastly underestimated because you need to have a consistent tagging model. You need to be able to enforce your tags. There's no point in somebody calls a machine dev, somebody calls development, the other guy calls it D, et cetera, et cetera. You won't get the reports, you won't be able to take the actions. So having really strong control around your tags is critical. In fact, some of the best practices that I've seen with one client, basically, if your machine is not tagged properly, a Reaper bot will just turn it off in 5 minutes. You go ahead and provision and do whatever you want, but we're going to turn it off in 5 minutes if it doesn't have the proper tags, right? It's a strategy I also put for my architecture group after I got the bill.
And these tags are synced with providers. So if I define these tags in ACP and I go look at my provider portal, I'm going to see these tags and find out there as well. So, all right, so tags are great. What else can I do with them? I can go out into our portal here and I can search based on tag value, but what else can I do and how can I use those tags to further manage my costs, control my environment? So we have what we call policies. So I can go into policies and I'll talk a little bit about some of the different policies that we can use here. So based on tag values, I can define different policies. So let's say I tagged a VM as my demo environment. I know I'm going to use it for the next 2 months, and then after that, I'm going to be done. I don't want to have to go out and decommission that or power it off or shut it down, so I don't pay for it. So I can define what's called a lease expiration policy. So any VM that is tagged with PM demo, I can set an expiration date that on that date that VM is going to be automatically decommissioned, and I'm no longer going to have to pay for it. I can create a automatic power cycling policy. So any VM that has a tag of PM demo, I know I'm not going to be working on weekends doing demos, so I can set a policy that on Friday nights it's going to go out and shut down that VM, and then Monday mornings it's going to bring it back up for me. I can also use those tags to control my access to those VMs and who can do what. So that's called an automatic restriction policy. So based on the tag value, I can control who can do what to what VMs. We also have something called governance policies. So I can go out and create a governance policy and say I don't want anybody to go out and request a new provider accounts, which is something I can do through my cloud management platform. So that's something I want to control. Whenever somebody submits a request for a new provider account, I can require that it requires my approval before it's provisioned and completed. Okay?
So those policies, are really important. Policies to turn things off, policies to assign rights, and all of this happens automatically based on the tagging system. So this is why I kind of said tags are a really critical and underestimated part of managing your cloud state, right? Having a good, it's really having a good data model for what you're going to be running on the cloud.
Right.
Once you have that, then automation becomes a lot simpler, a lot easier.
So everything we're talking about are things that exist today. We're working on adding additional policies that I'll be able to identify orphaned or zombie resources that are not being able to be used anymore. So say if I have disk that's not attached to a VM, I can set a policy that it's automatically be deleted. So I don't have to pay for that. I can further control my costs. All right. Another thing out here is what we call an audit trail. So I want to have some insight into who's doing what they're doing, or if something happened, why it might have occurred. So we have this feature called an audit trail. So I can go out here and I can see what events have occurred, or in what period of time. I can do it by day, by month. I can see who's doing it over here on the left. I have the top 10 events that are happening. So it looks like a lot of people are viewing and discovering the infrastructure that they have. Over on the right, I can see who's doing it. So it looks like somebody named Ed Contini is doing a lot of work. So if you know Ed, we know that he does. So. And then down at the bottom, I've got a list of all the different events that occurred, and I can go out and search and find out what's happened, and do some analysis of what might have caused a problem to occur. All right, so that's our audit trail. All right, let's talk about analytics.
My favorite part.
What's that?
That's my favorite part.
This is the sexy part, I think. So, Rodrigo mentioned something about QADA in one of best practices in our methodology, which stands for questions, answers, decisions, and actions. And analytics is the A in the QADA. It provides you the answers to your questions so you can make decisions and take action, all of which you can do through our cloud management platform. So we talked about the tag values, and so let's look at a couple different ways that our cloud management platform uses those tags as part of our analytics. So I'm going to select the resource type. So we have resources or analytics for different types of resources. I'm going to choose the client or project I care about. I'm going to select the tag that I'm interested in. So here I've got a summary of my consumption by tag values. So on the top here, this is at a client summary level. So I talked about the client, project, sub-project hierarchy, and this is at the client level. So for all my projects and sub-projects, I have some insight into my consumption. So if I was to hover over these bars, I would see over here on the left, I've got 9 application servers, 2 database servers, 3 others. I've got a number of servers that are untagged. Over on the right, I can view those by provider, by project, and down at the bottom, it's broken down for me by individual project or sub-projects that are within my client project structure. I also have something that's called cost drill down. And so using this cost drill down feature, I can see where my costs are and drill down into them and see where I'm spending my money. And then I can take actions in ACP, and those actions might include implementing those policies that we just talked about to save me money. So here I see a graph of my current consumption. I can show a forecast, see if I expect to be over or under budget at the end of the month. And down at the bottom, I see some more information that I can drill into further. So I could drill into, click on Cloud Management Pilot Project here, and I can see this information specifically for that project. In the center, I can see, get some information based on the tags that I've defined. So if I was to click on the tag called primary use, I can see that for my tags, VMs that are tagged with resources with PM work, $230. I'm spending $230 for those VMs. Over on the right, I can see that by category, and down at the bottom, I can see that information by service. So analytics provides the answers to the questions I have so I can make decisions and take action to reduce my costs, control, and manage my environment.
So hopefully this is making it clear what we mean by a control plane for your public cloud consumption, right? It's being able to understand what you have, being able to take actions, being able to understand, analyze, and then decide what's the best course of action, including things like, have you over-provisioned a VM? Have you under-provisioned a VM? Are you paying too much? Do you have stranded resources, disks that are sitting orphaned somewhere and you're paying for them, right? So I think we're going to finish now with the final piece, manage.
Final piece, manage. So we talked about how I can manage my costs, control my resources, who does what, and we're going to talk about how I can secure, protect, and back up my resources in the cloud. And primarily, we're talking about VMs. So for my dashboard, I could go in and I could select a particular VM. And there's also a catalog where you can go out and order these services. I have different actions that I can perform for this VM. I can start, stop them. But I also have something called Cloud Management Services. Rodrigo mentioned patching. Cloud patching is one of our services that we have set up that I can go out and subscribe my cloud resources to make sure they're protected and secure.
Right. So, if you will, David migrated some workloads. Ron put them on a SharePoint site. Now we're at manage. The state is there, and we need to add patching. Right. We need to add patching. So very simple here. Point to the machine, click it, and off you. It will add all the agents, do all the right things, put it on the schedules, and now you have patching for that machine, and you can do antivirus and of course backup.
The provisioning is automated. I get it quick. There's no long-term approval process that I need to have completed. And also in our platform here, we have what we call a CMS dashboard, where I can go out and make sure and see that all my VMs are subscribed to backup, patching, monitoring, or our antivirus services. So that's our cloud management platform and how me as a headless horseman
Thank you, David.
is developed.
And you can turn. Great. So what we just saw is basically we can reduce the cost of compute by 40% and lower the management costs by a significant amount, more than a third. Right? Why? Through standardization, automation, proper metadata management. Those are the secrets of managing in the cloud and the things we've learned managing a significantly large state in the cloud over the last 3 years. So with that, I'm going to turn to Michael.
All right, so hopefully we had 3 horsemen come up, take you through the challenges and how we solution these challenges. It's not just the tooling, some of the little bit of sexy tooling, Ron's excitement there. I mean, we have a lot of capability, a lot of visualization, integration, configuration, and automation behind the scenes. But what you're doing is rendering best practice, codifying that, and then scaling it. And from our perspective, dealing with larger organizations, I mean, this is absolutely critical in order to be able to leverage cloud, the new operating model versus the old capital-intensive model in this new day and age. So we announced yesterday a whole bunch of new features and capabilities in our cloud management platform. These capabilities have a lot of fidelity for Azure. They provide a lot of insight and capability around cost management, as well as kind of the organizational construct, capabilities to leverage, Azure resource models and whatnot, and resource groups. And so that capability is what we're bringing out to our clients worldwide in order to help them kind of leverage this journey to the cloud. And we're also wrapping various services around that. So it's not a point solution per se. It's not something you subscribe to, or download. It's something that it's a managed service. Most of these things, we have migration factories. We have commitment to certification programs and training. So that we have these cloud solution architects and cloud admins and these teams of migration specialists that can work at scale. Because our belief is that the faster you move, transition from a traditional estate to the new estate, the better the economics are for an organization. It takes out a lot of the underlying cost. And helps people become more agile organizations and more flexible to the needs of the business. So we have, I think, a couple of minutes here for questions. I really thank you for staying through this entire thing. There's a lot here. There's a lot of IP, a lot of investment in assets and people. But it is that combination of people, process, and technology that makes cloud real for a lot of organizations. Any questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you. Really appreciate your time today. We're here.